what does it look like online? And I have to say, I was really nervous when we first started it. And Susan's a real kind of expert on online programs, but what I'd say is I think it's been a fantastic medium, and what I've definitely learned is an hour and a half is enough. I used to run like 7-hour workshops. Now I think that's just absolutely crackers. Like, this time slot seems to really work, gives us enough time to keep sharp, focus on what it is that we want to talk about or think about, and then the method of having things to do between the sessions I think has been really, really useful. So hopefully you'll find that the case. So you may have seen this information before, but I just think it's helpful to start us off with this, right? Gallup did a survey in 2014. They've got more recent, but these stats are really helpful, I think, around levels of engagement at work. And what you'll see there is it's pretty shocking around the levels of engagement. Now, this is not in human services, not just in human services, kind of across all kind of industries. But on average, these are the kind of stats that, around 13% of people are engaged at work. And then you can see this, over 80% are actively not engaged, and the 24% that they talk about being actively disengaged are almost kind of sabotaging what goes on at work. And the other bit of information that I found really helpful anyway was that leaders particularly are quite dissatisfied in their roles and are tired of supposedly motivating employees to perform better. And I would be really fascinated to see stats in human services particularly, because I think in our support roles, I think people are engaged with people that they support. Whether they're engaged with the wider organisation, I would be interested to see the kind of stats, particularly around human services. But I suppose if we go with that, there's a bit of a problem really. And if we think about the kind of work that we're all involved in, there is, there's a problem. We need to be thinking about it and looking at it. We also know in this sector particularly, so I've worked in human services since I was 16, worked as a support worker for years, trained and worked as a social worker for a while, and then I've worked in a variety of different roles in support organisations in the government, not-for-profits and what have you. But this should come as no big surprise to you. So I remember being 17 and going to see, I think it was Wolfensberger talking, and he basically said exactly what's on this slide, which is the culture of your organisation completely impacts on the quality of services and supports that happen. So it's not new news. I think we've known it for a really long time, but I certainly can hold my hand up and say I think I've only recently come to a place where over the last, 4 to 5 years, where I've really started to think about what it means to be an employee and what does it mean around their citizenship and their self-direction. Because I think before that, I had a really kind of closed view on these people are there to serve the people and families, and they're the people who matter most. And I'm embarrassed to say that it's taken me to my mid-40s to start to think about actually what do we think about the people who are doing this job, and what about their quality of life and their self-direction or their citizenship. So yeah, I feel like I've really come at it late, and I feel pretty stupid for taking so long to get to that point. But the three images there that are on the slide are just kind of reminders really of when we don't focus on the culture, what happens. So in WA, there was a report, I think it was about 2 years ago now, around positive behaviour support. And the report, it just kind of leaks of this is all about culture. If you don't focus on the culture in your organisation or the culture of teams, then, interventions like positive behaviour support will be kind of pretty pointless, really. Urella was a big kind of abuse scandal in Australia, again, looking at the culture. And then the one in the left-hand corner, you might not be as familiar with, I was kind of immersed in it when I was in the UK, there was an undercover journalist went into an organisation called, or to a service called Winterbourne View. It was an assessment and treatment service. And the journalist, what he discovered and what was then aired on the BBC was absolutely appalling. So people being tied to chairs and all kinds of things. And what's fascinating when you look at the reports around Winterbourne, the same thing. It wasn't that people didn't know that things were happening. It was that the culture of that service was so poor and the kind of lack of trust amongst colleagues, that people just weren't willing to kind of put their head up and say this is not okay. So again, I don't think it's anything new. I think we're all really familiar with pay attention to the culture. I just wonder how much we do pay attention to it, is probably my practical experience. So we do know that there is evidence of organisations doing things differently, but like I say, I feel like I've been absolutely inspired by organisations outside of the sector, as well as some in, but definitely outside. And I suppose the thing that I really try to hold on to, over the last few years, I've talked a lot to support workers about what it's like to be a support worker. You know, I know what it was like when I did the job, what it's like to be a support worker, and what should organisations be doing to best serve them. And I remember really clearly an event I was at, and I was talking to support workers, and they said to me, we are employed in such a way, so they get paid by the hour, often on 0 hours contracts, or very minimal contracts. And the support worker said to me, we can't get a bank loan, and we can't get mortgages. So how come you're so concerned about the citizenship, or the keys to citizenship for people that we support, but you don't really give a shit about ours? And it absolutely stuck. You know, it was kind of like, actually, why aren't we doing that? Why are people's terms and conditions so poor? And I know that there's the kind of economic reality, but what you'll see, hopefully, throughout the programme is, I think there is a different way to do business, but I think it takes, some courage, and I think it takes a bit of a leap of faith, I think, to do things differently and to kind of work against the trend. So, I suppose I just really want to make the point about, when we think about our colleagues, the notion of self-direction, decision-making being close to them, are no different to the way that we think about customers. Like, we know that stuff works, and we know it makes a difference to people's lives. So in this programme, I know in the introduction you've heard a lot of people talking about self-management, and there definitely are speakers who will be coming on and talking about self-management, but these are some of the other areas that we'll be touching on throughout the programme. So some people may be familiar with TEAL. Frederick Laloux kind of coined that term, and has helped us think about what it takes to work in a kind of progressive organisational, progressive cultures, but there'll definitely be people who will be talking about that approach. The regenerative business, so if anybody's come across, actually I'm reading a fantastic book at the minute, which I'm obsessed with books. Oh, you won't be, can you see that? You won't be able to see it. I'll show you it in a minute. Anyway, it's by a woman called Carol Sanford, and she has many, many years experience of working with businesses, and she calls that a kind of regenerative business, which again is this kind of slightly different way of looking at how to do business. Holacracy, people might be familiar with, so that's the very kind of flat structures and flat practices. Self-management that we've mentioned. Deliberately developmental, so we have Brian Ungard, who's on next week, who will be talking to us about what a DDO is, or what a deliberately developmental organisation looks like and how it practices, which is utterly inspiring from my perspective. We'll be looking at self-organising and participatory organisations. That's definitely an area that Susan, who's on the call, has got lots of experience in. We'll spend some time looking at team development. And I've got there the experiment. I honestly think that if there were people here from the last programme, and we're going to show you some of the experiments that they ran in their own organisations, I think the learning absolutely came from that. So it's great having speakers, and it's great hearing about what they do or what they're doing, but definitely as we go through the programme, if you are working on something inside your organisation, no doubt about it, I think we all learned so much from the real practical application of trying to do something different. I think that's the stuff that we'll be immersed in throughout the programme. So I hope that's what you were expecting, and it's not a big shock. So I've already said all the sessions are online and in Zoom, and all of our information and communication is going to be in Slack, which Susan's going to show us in a minute. We will have guest speakers, and where we don't have a speaker, you're the speakers. So basically we do a kind of open reflection where everybody gets the chance to update us on what they've been doing, how their experiments are going, or whatever it is that they're doing inside their organisation. We have a book club that, and that's entirely up to you. So some people love the reading, some people don't, but we'll have a book club, so a book of the month. and we'll all get the chance to read that, and then in one of our open reflection sessions we'll get the chance to kind of chew the fat around it, but that's the optional. And I've already mentioned about the times, so actually, here it is. So the times do change because based on the speakers. And obviously, if they're later on in the day, that's because it's a European speaker. Earlier, usually it's somebody from the States. So there's been some tweaking before, when you booked onto this, Bev should have now sent you all the correct times, because when we've had a speaker who can't do the slot that we had identified for them, we've had to move it around, and that also means we have to move the times around. So you should all have now the calendar invites from Bev, which will have all of these sessions in. And I'll also make sure that this list, it'll go in the Zoom channel, but I'll also make sure that this list gets emailed out to you all so you know what's coming up and who's coming up. So the speakers we've got are Brian Ungard, who, like I say, is going to talk about deliberately developmental organisations. Alana Irvin, who, actually, Susan, can you just give us a bit about Alana? Because I don't know Alana.
Yeah, so Alana speaks about something called full circle leadership. It's an amazing way to look at the different sort of elements of leadership that are needed for well-rounded leadership in organizations, and she's going to take us through a pretty fantastic process and encourage us to look at our leadership a little bit differently.
Okay, cool, thank you. Then we've got Doug Kirkpatrick. So you'll notice that there's 2 sessions there that have got speakers. It usually is a speaker, open reflection, but we've had to move things around to accommodate for speakers. So we've got a guy called Doug Kirkpatrick who's coming on, who worked for Morning Star. So if anybody has read the Frederick Laloux book, Morning Star's featured in that. It's a tomato processing factory. And they have, I can't remember the number now. Susan, would you know? So is it about 16,000 staff?
It depends on what season it is. I don't think it's quite that many, but I think that it's up to about 4,000 or 5,000 in season.
Right, okay. So that whole organisation is self-managed. So that's really inspiring. And he is really practical. I really enjoyed his talk last time around contracts and people contracting with teams and contracting with each other. So that's just fascinating. Then we've got Pim de Marie, who is one of the founders of Corporate Rebels. And Corporate Rebels, if you're not familiar with them, we'll talk a little bit about them later on today, but they started as 2 guys who went out into the world, created a bucket list of organisations that they felt were like contemporary or doing something brilliant, and they've gone and interviewed all the organisations and have certainly got a kind of position on what contemporary organisations should focus on. So that will be great. And then the last speaker that we have planned is Helen Sanderson. And Helen has a consultancy business in the UK and Australia, I think. And she recently set up an organisation called Wellbeing Teams, which is kind of based on the Bertzorg model in Holland. And Helen will be coming and talking about that. And again, great session. She's very honest about the highs and the lows, and what she's learned. Just before I move on, the only thing I will say is if we do get the chance of more speakers, then we'll just add them in. So they're the ones that we've definitely got booked, but what I've learned is as time goes on, you come across somebody that you think, actually, it'd be great if you could come and talk to us. So just kind of be prepared for that we may end up adding in people here and there if we can. But that's the structure so far. So Susan, are you going to just talk to us about Slack?
Yeah, Kate, I just need you to know that we're very far behind schedule today.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is that I talk about Slack, then we go into the activity and cut out the whole part about my talking about different kinds of organizations and save that for another session. We'll do the activity, and then we'll do the Corporate Rebels experiment canvas, and then we'll close. So hopefully that's okay with you. So Slack, can I just get a show of hands? Who has used Slack or uses Slack regularly? Okay. Can I also get another show of hands? Who has not received their Slack invitation for? Okay, so everybody should have received an invitation to our Slack channel on the email that you provided to Bev when you signed up for the course. So you might want to go in and check your spam or you might just want to check again if you haven't checked your email for today, because Slack is the main way that we're going to communicate with each other asynchronously throughout the program when between meeting times. So I guess my other invitation is, if you're struggling with getting signed up, if you don't get your invitation, please email me directly or through Bev, and I'll help onboard you, because this is a really fundamental part of how we're going to share information and continue to communicate with each other throughout the course of the program. So what I'll do now is just show you what Slack looks like. So I am on way too many Slack channels. This is the Slack app. You don't need to have the Slack app. You can just go in through your web browser and go www.slack.com and go into your and sign up through that means. And the name of our Slack channel is rethinkorgs_WAIS. And when you get yourself into Slack, you will automatically be in a channel called General and a channel called Random. So the General channel is where we'll paste all of the updates, where we'll paste the videos from the sessions, where we will continue communicating with any news or changes or interesting things throughout the course of the program. I will also be asking for every organization to start their own channel, and I can help you set up that if you're not familiar with how to do that in Slack. I also expect there will be other projects we'll be looking at. We might have a book club. We might have, I think there was somebody from WAISro suggested that we have a YouTube channel. So this is another practice, especially for distributed and decentralized teams, that can help us have one place to go for all the information and start to move us away from this onslaught of emails and multiple CCs and BCs, and help us to work. And I also understand that it might feel a little bit like tool overload, but I'm also pretty confident that once you get the hang of it, that we'll all be happy using this. I just need everybody's kind of commitment that if you don't get onto Zoom within the next few days, or certainly before the next session, please do reach out to me directly so that I can get you on board.
Susan, is there any chance that you could mute, I think it's Mackenzie?
It's not me. Who do I'll mute Mackenzie. Yep. There you go.
Thank you. Which is, I think it's you, John. I think there's a bit of background noise coming through. Okay, thanks, Susan. So, are you going to take us through?
I will. So what we're going to do now is do a little bit of have some fun with Zoom and go into smaller groups to think about some questions. So we've had a little bit of an introduction. We've heard from everybody what kind of drew you to this program, but we'd like to kind of shift gears now from sort of the meta and the macro down to how you think about this personally, and how you think about it when you think about new ways of working in your own organization. So the questions for reflection are these. What comes up for you when you think about there being another way to do business? Several of you in your check-ins talked about the fact that you were attracted to these concepts because the old kind of patriarchal top-down command and control systems that have been in place, since the Industrial Revolution don't really serve us as, modern evolved human beings. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of other examples about how we can organize for the benefit of ourselves and our ongoing development, but also to the benefit of the people that we're serving through our work. So what comes up for you when you think about there being another way to do business? And think about it from two dimensions. So what could be the best thing about it? And what feels like some of the scarier things? So what could be the risks around changing the way that we think about business and potentially changing the way that we do business? I'm just going to ask Kate if you can just type these questions into the chat. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the breakout room function in Zoom, and I'm going to send you off into separate rooms. So what's going to happen now is that you're going to get a prompt up on your screen that says join breakout room. Just hit that button and you'll be taken away to a room where you'll land with 2 or 3 other people. I'm going to give you time in your breakout rooms for about 5 or 7 minutes to discuss these questions. Kate, have you typed them into the chat yet?
Yep, just doing it now.
Great. And then what will happen is that when the time's up, you'll get a little warning saying that the rooms will close in 1 minute. Take that opportunity to wrap up your conversation, and then you'll be directed straight back into the to the main session. So as soon as Kate gets those questions into the chat, I'm going to send you off into your groups of 3.
Okay.
And here they are. Just give me a second to finish this little process. And have a lot of fun, and we'll see you back here in about 5 or 6 minutes. Welcome back, everybody.
Went so quick.
Hi. It does. I'm sure that it kind of felt like you were just getting into it, but I'd love just to hear quick kind of popcorn style. And when I say popcorn style, that's a way of participating without being called on or without going in order. So the idea is like you're a piece of popcorn, and when you're ready to go pop, then you can just speak. So maybe just I'd love to hear back from 3 or 4 of you. What came up for you? What surprised you in that conversation? Who'd like to go?
Let me pop, because I'm always one to talk. So we did run out of time, but I guess keeping it really brief, we're all in agreement that it's an exciting opportunity by doing something differently, and that there are ways. So whether it's a framework or a belief, and that ultimately, I guess how we were just wrapping up was that fundamentally, if we trust our staff and empower our staff, we think that good things can happen, and that for people that think that the risks are what staff will do, that Four Corners has shown us it's not the frontline staff we have to worry about.
Great, thanks. Who else would like to share?
Susan, can I just interrupt? Wendy's not here. Is she in a room alone?
Yeah, so Kate, yeah, something happened. She just texted me. She got removed by the host. I said, what did she say?
How rude. How rude, Susan Basterfield.
I don't know if Wendy said something rude, but she'd like to be let back in.
Okay, I'm not quite sure how to do that. Just give me a second. Maybe Kate, do you want to host
Yeah. Okay, so who wants to pop next?
I'm happy to just, we just had it seemed to go very quickly, but just shared a little bit about the experience, obviously, at Avivo, having been through the big changes, what the fears were from staff and how that panned out. And
Okay, cool. Okay then, unless anybody's dying to pop, we'll keep going. No? Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen again then.
Hold on, I do want to hear, sorry, I wasn't done. I wanted to hear some of the scary things quickly.
Oh, okay. Are you going to make them pop then?
I can wait it out, right? Go, Andrea.
We only got to that at the very end, so we've got lots of good things. But we just started saying a lack of cohesiveness, of trying to get a shared vision and how to do things. So people might be out of the loop, or some people make decisions and other people don't know yet that those decisions have been made. That's as far as we got. That's my part.
Yeah, well, I'd pop in there too, Andrea, because Alicia, she seemed, oh, there you are. These were Alicia's things, but she was like speaking right to my fear around you not really certain that people share the same values when they're doing their work directly with clients. And I think that's actually the biggest thing for me is, just that making sure the values are embedded in the good what I understand is good practice. I suppose that's my control freak still coming out in me.
Thanks for that. She should just be able to re-enter, so just ask her to log back in. Should be fine. Great, so thanks for that. Kate, do you want to share the one slide that I'd just like to quickly speak to before we move into the final part of the evening? And I hope that sometime during the course we can have time to talk a little bit more specifically around some of the theories and I don't like to call them frameworks, more methodologies and kind of thinking around management theory that's kind of led us to this place. And I guess the bottom line to any change is that there's a spectrum, right? So you can change a little thing, and it might do something, it might not. It might illuminate a whole nest of other, problems that need to be addressed. It might actually shine a light on the deeper reasons for systemic disorder or other things that are really at the heart of what's limiting the organization from actually moving into its full potential. But it really is important that when we're going through this process together, there's all kinds of places where the interventions can start, and it needs to start somewhere. So thinking about, what are the values and beliefs of the organization? Like Angela was saying, if one of her fundamental core values is ensuring great consistent work, or a level of care that is really has a specific feel or look to it. If those aren't aligned with other people in the organization or in the organization, then that could be a really interesting point of initial intervention. Things like meaningful work and the purpose of the organization. How do we create great, strong teams? One of my favorites is adult-to-adult relationships. If we just scratch the surface and look at ourselves in the mirror and think of the times where we take on a parenting stance in the workplace, either because we think we know what's best or because we want to, quote unquote, protect people from harm or don't want to let them fail or want to take responsibility, how much that limits our ability to actually grow in our work and feel good about the work that we're doing. How do we match strengths to needs? How do we design our roles that are not pejorative job descriptions that are expecting everybody to be a robot and fit into the same kind of box in terms of what we expect them to do? How do we create the safety and the ability and the shared context so that we can make decisions together, so that decision flows aren't just going to one person just because they have a particular title or just because that's the way it's always been done? How do we make it safe enough for us to be more participatory in our decision making? What information do we want to share? What does transparency look like? What is the difference between just opening up the books and maybe having a process of helping everybody up their game in terms of financial literacy? because there's big differences. Again, you know, you say, okay, just make everything open and transparent. Well, that doesn't by itself do anything. It's really about how we share information and context, how we do our learning and development. You know, Kate and I both are really interested in this theory that our workplace provides us everything we need to do our ongoing learning and development. We don't necessarily need to go to extra courses or do extra things, even go away and sit on a mountain to do our ongoing psychosocial development, with the workplace and the work that we do out in the world gives us those opportunities. You know, everything from how we do our routines and rituals in the workplace, what we think about compensation. I mean, we're going to hear from Morningstar, who do self-set salaries. Like, none of us might ever get to that point, but there's some organizations on that continuum, as I say, that doing this really successfully, and it's really enabling great outcomes for both from a commercial perspective and also from an employee satisfaction perspective. Things like, how do we recruit and onboard, do our strategies, initiatives. All of this stuff might have to change, but really the invitation is during this course to pick one or two of these areas and start with a really tiny little experiment to see, if we just move that one step to the left, what might change? And Kate's going to take us through a process or a kind of a framework from the corporate rebels that you'll take away into these next couple of weeks and bring back as you start to think about how you might want to experiment in your own organization or in your own team. So
I'm just going to show, Susan, it might be helpful for people. I'm just going to show people the experiments of the last group of organisations, right? So Susan's absolutely right. There is a framework that the corporate rebels have got that might help you think about an experiment that you want to try. But this is what the organisations did on the last group, right? So St Jude's developed a process for teams to evaluate their manager with a view that, is it possible that the manager is of service to the teams, and how to kind of change that? So they went through a process of evaluating the manager. One-to-one looked at changing PDs based on people's actual contributions. So instead of saying you are a service coordinator, they looked at, Monique, you are absolutely fabulous at connecting with people and networking. We should change your PD to network connector. And does that make sense? So one-to-one had a kind of dabble around that. Mosaic, they did exactly what Susan was talking about there, team financial transparency. So all of their teams, I think they took about 6 teams and gave them their actual financial data and supported them to learn how to read the spreadsheets and the budget sheets and to be responsible for that. Had a massive impact with the 6 teams that it worked on, really positive. Avivo, the team that came on the program from there, they tried, Google did quite a famous 20% rule where every employee has 20% of their time to work on whatever they wanted to, whatever kind of floats their boat. And that was where some of that kind of, I think that was where the Gmail and all that kind of stuff came about, that people had kind of been experimenting with stuff in this 20% time. They had to go at that. For policies, Chorus was in a particular space at that time. They're an organisation, 3 organisations had merged, so they wanted to completely change the way the policies were written and approved. CLA, they had some experiments around self-managed teams. My Place did a brilliant experiment around credit cards for support workers. So they looked at the process for acquittals and how long it took if support workers were paying out of their own pocket and then having to claim it back, in the admin process. So they gave 3 teams their own credit cards and basically had the rule: spend in a way that you think is good for the customer, good for the organisation, and good for you. And they were the rules. And it's really fascinating, their experiment, because there's support teams are incredibly vigilant about what they spend on that credit card. I mean, they are like super, super vigilant. So that was really interesting, changed all of their admin around how they claimed and what have you. United Care West, they are in the process of looking at self-managed teams. So they did a lot of work around mapping decision making, because I think some of the managers were finding that difficult. And they mapped decisions and then actively moved the decisions closer to the teams and moved them away from managers. SDS, they looked at their approvals process. That was in connection with the NDIS. So they had a process around accepting new people. And they looked at that, and that sat with the person that actually sat in somebody's living room to do that, rather than it be a manager. Enable, again, they looked at self-managed teams. And the multicultural services, they looked at decision making and moved decisions closer to their kind of frontline workers. So that just gives you a kind of feel, really, for what people had a dabble in. Like I say, I think the organisations would say to you, having a go at stuff is probably where the real learning is. It's great to hear from different speakers, but that work. And we all, when we joined on the calls, we were all really interested to hear about how's that going. Another couple of experiments that just might give you some ideas. I'm working with an organisation in Scotland at the moment who they are looking at, their organisation uses a lot of agency staff, and they are looking at developing a kind of team bonus and a colleague bonus where you don't use agency staff and we cover each other, and there's a kind of financial bonus in that. So that's one of the things they're looking at. And certainly the area I'm immersed in at the moment is around where you don't have supervisors. What does an alternative like supervision and appraisal process look like? So I don't want a supervision process, I want a support process. So that's the stuff that I'm immersed in. That was the book that I thought I was showing you before, which around Carol Sanford, which is about what does feedback do to people. So that I just thought it might be helpful to hear a couple of examples really of how people have how they've approached this. So like Susan says, you might be immersed in something in your own organisation right now, and that's the thing that you're happy to share and support everybody else to learn a bit about. But the corporate rebels have these 8 themes that they reckon that when they've gone and looked at some of the most contemporary organisations in the world, these themes keep popping up really. And what they would say is in the contemporary organisations, the kind of culture of experimentation is massive. So to give things a go. So for example, what would a team bonus look like instead of using agency staff? Just give it a go. That's certainly what they've learned looking at these organisations. So I won't go through them because you can see them. I'll also post an article into Slack which gives you a bit more detail behind these themes. But you can go wherever you like in this programme. You may listen to Brian on the next call and think I'm really interested in the notion of deliberately developmental and try something around that, or contracting with colleagues when you listen to Doug Kirkpatrick. But I think this framework's helpful. And one of the ways that the rebels use this is if you did a kind of vote in your organisation, which I know Avivo did do that. So if I can get hold of those results, and if Avivo are okay for me to share them, I will. But it was a real shock. So we did a survey based on these 8 themes and said to people, if something had to change in Avivo, what would you want us to focus on? And the area that came up the highest, which I was devastated about, but nonetheless, the area that came up the highest was supportive leadership. The sample people in Avivo who did the survey, that was the area that they felt was lacking in Avivo and we needed to focus on. So that's another way of doing it. You could use these themes and ask people in the organisation, if you wanted us to focus on anything, where would it be? And I think that's a really good place to start. That might kind of focus you in a particular direction, because it definitely wouldn't have been the area that I would have focused on, to be honest. I think I had a very different, probably deluded view of, what people thought about that. So I'll post all of that in to the channel so that you can see that. There is a canvas, it looks like that. So you could put that up in your workplace and get people to add comments on, what do you think we should focus on? So it's just the themes that I've just shown you. So purpose and values, network of teams, supportive leadership, experiment and adapt, talents and mastery, radical transparency, distributed authority, freedom and trust. So that's the work that we're inviting you to do between now and the next session, so that you come back to the next session with, this is the area that we're focused on. And these are some of the ideas we've got in terms of an experiment, if that is okay. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen if I can.
Yeah, sure thing, Nikki. We'll post the entire PDF in the Slack channel. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. The other thing, if you are interested in the book club, so this is the book about deliberately developmental organisations. Actually, it may be easy if I share my screen so you can see you don't have to look at my, there it is. So this is a book by a guy called Bob Keegan and Lisa Laskow-Leigh. And Decurion, which is the organisation that Brian Ungard runs, who is coming on the next call. Decurion are featured in this book. So yeah, it could be good prep really for listening to Brian. You don't have to read it, so don't be thinking, oh my God, I didn't sign up to read loads of books. If that's not your thing, that's fine. But if you are interested, I definitely recommend it. I think it's a great book and really pushes your thinking around what it takes to support everybody's development in a way that is probably, I want to say, more wholesome. But yeah, Brian will explain that in more detail. So that'll be the book that we're going to be reading over the next few weeks. So it's an invitation to do that. Again, I'll post that into Slack. And we'll also post a article by Brian called Operationalizing Love. And when Susan first told me about that, it made me go a bit bilious because that's not my kind of thing. And I thought, oh my God, now we're talking about love. But what I would definitely say is it's fabulous. Really, really pushes you thinking. So we'll put the article in there as well, which is much smaller than the book. So if you think, I just want to read the article, then that's cool. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's everything. Is that everything, Susan?
Yeah, that feels good. It just, you make me laugh when you say it makes you feel bilious. So
I think it's all the bloody American thing, man. It's like now we're starting to talk about love. I feel like we're going to have some kind of loving. But what I would say to you is it's fabulous, isn't it? Brilliant.
It is.
It's really changed the way that I give feedback massively. Okay, so we're at 1:30. I know it does everybody's head in if we go over. So we'll call it a day there. It's a really different session, this one, because it's been more around getting to know who's in the room and kind of setting the context. So don't forget to go and set up your Slack. So get into Slack. If you have any problems, get in touch with Bev, myself, or Susan, and we can help you get logged on. And I have the Slack app on my phone, which I find much more helpful. It means I actually see it and look at it, because it kind of sends you notifications like Facebook, and that's simple and easy for me. So I definitely recommend that. All of the materials will be in the Slack channel. So the PowerPoints, the articles, any links to the speakers that we can find that might give you a bit of prep beforehand. But like I say, that's entirely optional, so you don't have to do that. And then could you come to the next session with some kind of idea about an experiment that you're going to use this program to have a go at within your organization? That would be brilliant. I think that's it all. Okay, should we do a checkout? We've got time for a checkout.
Yeah, let's do a one-word fun checkout. What's one thing you're looking forward to this weekend? I can start. I'm looking forward to some amazing food by the chef here at the retreat. Andrea, what about you?
Looking forward to some sleep.
Nikki?
I was going to say sleeping too, so I'm with Andrea.
Angela? You're muted. Yeah.
Yeah. Going to the market tomorrow morning.
Nice.
Justin?
I've just had a teenager join our family with my little girl turning 13, so it's celebration for me.
Nice. Katie?
I'm really looking forward to a theatre performance that I'm seeing tomorrow.
Fantastic. Jade?
Spending time with my little girl on the weekend.
Monique?
I was going to steal Jade's actual real one, which is wine.
Nice. Renee?
Ditto wine. I'm just about to jump in the car right now to head down to our Margaret River wine region. So wine it is.
Nice one. Denver?
Relaxing before we move house next week.
Great. Ruth?
Yeah, just some time with my crazy kids. Yeah.
Nice. Kate? Lawrence?
Round 4 FLW.
I have no idea what that means, but I'm sure it's great. Yeah.
Sorry for the non-Australians. It's football, women's football.
Nice. Alicia?
Probably just lunch with my mum.
Nice. Wendy, since you can't hear or see us, maybe you could type it in the chat. She can't hear or see us. I'm sorry. Jason?
Mowing my lawns and having a beer.
Nice. And Miss Fulton?
Same as some of the others. I'm heading down to Margaret River too, and I'm going on a wine tour on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to that.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Sorry for the minute over. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks. See ya.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.